Hey, I see it's a couple minutes after 3. Um, so that I don't take too much of your time, I'm going to go ahead and get started, although we may have people who are still trickling in.
Vemos que pasaron un par de minutos después de las 3. Vamos a comenzar también para respetar su tiempo. Sin embargo, sabemos que otras personas se estarán incorporando.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's public workshop, where we will discuss CARB's plans to develop improved tools to evaluate the air quality benefits of transportation projects.
Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy al taller público donde abordaremos los planes de CARB para hablar de las herramientas mejoradas para evaluar los beneficios de proyectos de transporte en la calidad del aire.
We are offering Spanish interpretation for the webinar today, but this is only available if you're participating through the Zoom application.
Estamos ofreciendo interpretación al español a través del webinar hoy día, pero solamente está disponible si usted participa a través de la aplicación de Zoom.
We will be activating this momentarily, and once we do, everyone participating on Zoom will need to click the word Interpretation with the globe found at the bottom of the Zoom window and select the language you would like to hear, English or Spanish.
Estaremos activando la acción de interpretación momentáneamente, donde ustedes podrán participar a través de Zoom. Ustedes necesitan buscar el globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de su pantalla, donde verán la palabra interpretación y podrán elegir su idioma, inglés o español.
Even if you'll continue to listen in English, you must make the selection in Zoom.
Usted puede hacer la elección del idioma de su preferencia, aún si es bilingüe. Le pedimos que de todas formas elija un lenguaje.
Without selecting a language, you will hear no audio during the webinar.
Si no elige uno de los dos lenguajes, usted no podrá tener el audio completo a través del webinar.
To hear only Spanish, please click Mute Original Audio.
Para solamente escuchar las intérpretes que le acompañan hoy día, si desea escuchar una sola voz, trate de apagar o silenciar el audio original.
I will now take a moment to turn on interpretation services.
Voy a tomar un momento para comenzar y activar los servicios de interpretación. Aquí es donde ustedes van a elegir en el globo terráqueo. Gracias.
Okay, thank you everyone for selecting your language preference. Hopefully you had an easier time than I did there finding the correct button. My name is Kristen Major, and I am an air pollution specialist in CARB's Sustainable Transportation and Communities Division. I will be serving as today's primary presenter, but there are several CARB staff participating in today's workshop who will be either helping to facilitate or answering questions as needed. All of the CARB staff will be invited to introduce themselves shortly, but first I would like to turn it over to Carrie Connect, Chief of the Transportation and Land Use Planning Branch, to give some opening remarks.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for attending the workshop today. As Kristen said, my name is Carrie Connect. I'm the branch chief of CARB's Land Use and Transportation Planning Branch here within the Sustainable Transportation and Communities Division. And I can see that there are already over 100 people here this afternoon. I'm so happy that so many of you have joined us. Today's workshop will be interactive, and beginning in just a few minutes, we will use polls and discussion questions to be able to learn more about you, what brought you here today, and how this work can best assist you in the important work that you are all doing. The conversation today is an important one, as all of you know, because in California, despite making great progress in air quality since the 1960s, there are still far too many people, more than half in fact, who live in areas that exceed Federal Clean Air Act standards, such as the 70 ppb ozone standard. And we know that addressing this will require us to reduce emissions from mobile sources. In 2022, CARB released the state strategy for the state implementation plan, to outline a plan to help California meet these air quality goals. And it was in that document that CARB committed to exploring several options for enhanced technical tools and resources, including the ones that we will discuss today. Your work on these efforts is very valuable in making the air cleaner and improving public health through steps like identifying transportation control measures. We know that funding sources, such as the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program and the California Motor Vehicle Registration Fee Program, provide important sources of flexible funding to do so. And before we begin, I want to recognize that we are not alone in this work and thank some other agencies who have contributed to what you will hear today. Our federal, state, and local partners have helped us think through how this work can be most beneficial. And finally, of course, I want to thank all of you for being here today, and most of all, for your hard work to improve air quality and public health in the state. I also want to thank you in advance for the input that you will hopefully provide throughout this presentation and afterwards, because the technical resources we discuss today will only be valuable if they are practical, effective, and aligned with the goals of these programs. So with that, let me hand it over to the members of the team that have been working so hard on this so that you can meet them, beginning with Nesamani Kalandir. Mani?
Thanks, Carrie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nesamani Kalandir. I manage transportation analysis section within CARB. My team is responsible for implementing the CMAC program, SB 375, and transportation conformity. With that, let me ask Kevin to introduce himself.
Thank you, Mani. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Hindrawan. I'm an air resources engineer, also with CARB's Sustainable Transportation and Communities Division, involved here at CARB with the CMAC program. For today's workshop, I'll be helping facilitate the polling portions. And I will pass it to Razi Nadaf for introductions.
Hello, everybody. I'm Razi Nadaf. I'm a staff air pollution specialist within CARB. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Carrie, for the opening remarks and the rest of the CARB team. I'm now going to walk through how to participate because we're hoping to get a lot of audience input today. First, if you need technical assistance at any point, you can send a message using the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to assist you. Throughout the workshop, if you have any clarifying questions, you can type those into the Q&A, and we will try to respond verbally when there's a break in the presentations, particularly if it's a clarifying question that will help with the audience's understanding of the project. All other questions that are not clarifying questions should be held until the end of the presentation. There will be portions of the workshop where we would like to get specific feedback, and at those points, we'll seek your input through interactive online polling. When we get to those parts of the workshop, we will walk you through how to use the polling feature. And finally, toward the end of our agenda, approximately 1 hour from now, we'll have a formal public comment period where you'll be able to indicate that you'd like to make a verbal public comment or ask a question by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Alternatively, if you're participating by phone, you will be able to use *9 to raise your hand. When we get to that point on the agenda, I'll repeat these instructions. I'm going to pause here to see if we had any clarifying questions come into the Q&A regarding the participation instructions that I should answer before we move on. Razi, are you seeing any questions in the Q&A that you think we should answer now?
There is not any question at this moment.
Okay, great. Thanks, Razi. Now that we're done going over logistics, I'd like to start the presentation by giving you a high-level summary of why we're here today and what we hope to achieve with this project. With this project, CARB will develop improved technical resources and tools to help project sponsors, metropolitan planning organizations, and local air districts estimate the air quality benefits of transportation projects. The focus of these resources and tools will be on measuring the cost effectiveness of reducing criteria air pollutants, such as ozone, particulate matter, and carbon monoxide. This differs from the tools that CARB develops for the California Climate Investments Program, which are focused on measuring the cost effectiveness of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. These resources are expected to be particularly helpful for agencies and project sponsors that are located in non-attainment areas for state or federal air quality standards. The overarching idea is that if CARB can provide improved technical resources and tools to help interested parties accurately estimate the emissions benefits of transportation projects, then that will result in effective transportation projects being selected and funded across the state, which will result in strong air quality benefits. This is our ultimate goal with the project. Some of the most common use cases for these resources and tools are listed here on this slide. We'll provide more background information and detail about each of these use cases later in the presentation, but for now, we just want to highlight them at a high level. First, these resources and tools are expected to be helpful when metropolitan planning organizations, or MPOs, as well as air districts in non-attainment areas, are considering what transportation control measures, or TCMs, to implement to achieve federal or state air quality standards. Another common use case will likely be when metropolitan planning organizations are considering what transportation projects to fund with federal congestion mitigation and air quality, or CMAQ, grant dollars. Finally, many local air districts may use these resources when considering what projects to fund with their motor vehicle fees, or MV fees, revenues. Now that you understand at a high level why we're here, and we've discussed the project overview and purpose, I'd like to briefly walk you through the rest of the agenda for today's workshop. First up, after the agenda, we'll take some quick polls to better understand who's in the audience participating with us today. This will be followed by a discussion of transportation control measures, or TCMs, including more detailed background information on TCMs and a description of the resources and tools that we're considering developing on the TCM topic. After that, we'll discuss the CMAQ and MVFees programs together because they're both funding programs and they both require similar tools and resources. Again, I'll start with background information, followed by the tools and resources that CARB is considering developing. Finally, we'll discuss the project timeline and next steps. And after that, we'll open up the floor for verbal public comments and questions, which will be limited to approximately 2 minutes or less per speaker to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to participate. We have a scheduled end time of 4:30 today, but CARB staff is available to stay until all who want to make a verbal public comment have had the opportunity to do so. As I mentioned, we really want to get a lot of feedback from you today, so during the sections underlined in yellow, we'll be asking specific questions using an interactive polling tool. In order to give everyone a sense of who's in the workshop with us today, we thought we could do a quick practice session of the interactive polling feature. This will both give us a preview of what we have in store later in the workshop, and like I said, help us see who's here. Kevin will be leading today's polling sessions, so I will turn it over to him to walk you through the questions.
Thanks, Kristen. So for our first poll, we're just going to do a simple survey. Please join by using either the link provided or the QR code up there. Once you're in the survey, type in your name and feel free to go through the questions at your own pace. We're just going to be asking what sector you represent, what part of California do you represent, and what is or are your primary reasons for joining this workshop. There are 3 questions in this first survey, so when you're done with each question, please press next to go to the next question. And we will give you guys about a minute for this one. see some of you are still taking the surveys, so we'll give a little bit more time just for those 10 people to finish their surveys.
Vanessa, I see you raised your hand. I'm gonna allow you to talk if you have any technical problem or any clarification question. Thank you. You can unmute and talk.
Kevin, we should start sharing the results. I think 6 people are not answering, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for your participation. We're just going to briefly look at the survey's results here. Seems that most of our participants today are from representing the metropolitan planning organizations with a healthy dose of state agencies. Kind of curious to hear or see what other sectors are being represented here. It seems like most of our participants are also representing Southern California, but we do have statewide and also other parts of California, if not beyond as well. And finally, seems like the most dominant reason for people to join today's workshop is to work because they work on the CMAQ or receive CMAQ funds. But again, there's a lot of other options, so hopefully we get a chance to listen to what those are. Before I give it back to Kristen, I would like to thank you all for participating in these surveys. These surveys really do help us tailor our approach moving forward. So any feedback that you give us is really, really appreciated. And with that, I will return it back to Kristen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kevin, for facilitating that poll and helping us understand who's participating today. As I mentioned earlier, one of the common use cases for the tools and resources that we are developing will be for interested parties in non-attainment areas to use them when they are considering what transportation control measures, or TCMs, to implement in order to achieve federal or state air quality standards. For those who are unfamiliar with the Transportation Control Measure, or TCM analysis process, this slide will provide a little bit of background information on that requirement. Federal clean air laws require that areas with unhealthy levels of ozone, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide develop plans known as State Implementation Plans, or SIPs, which describe how the area is going to meet and maintain air quality standards. A SIP is not just a single document, it's a compilation of plans, programs, rules, regulations, and controls, some of which are led by the state, some of which are led by the local air districts, some of which are led by the federal government, and some of which are a joint effort between some or all of these parties. So you don't need to understand everything on this slide, or every element represented by a circle. But we just want to highlight that the TCM analysis is one of the elements of an attainment demonstration, which is a joint effort between the state, local air districts, and the federal government to show how they will reduce pollution by the required levels by a given year. And it falls under the much larger SIP umbrella. An analysis of potential transportation control measures, or TCMs, is not required in all non-attainment areas. It's only required in ozone and PM 2.5 non-attainment areas. Also, that particular component of the attainment demonstration is led by MPOs in coordination with the local air districts, because the MPOs are required to coordinate the development of their long-range transportation plans with the TCM analysis process. Essentially, the purpose of a TCM analysis is to make sure that air districts are considering as many transportation control measures as possible when they are thinking about how to bring ozone and PM 2.5 areas into attainment. So what exactly is the definition of a transportation control measure? A transportation control measure, or TCM, is defined as being either one of the 16 TCM project types listed in Section 108F of the Clean Air Act, or any measure that reduces emissions from transportation sources by either reducing vehicle use or changing traffic flow or congested conditions. In the interest of time, I won't go through all of the 16 TCM types listed in Section 108F of the Clean Air Act, but I'll just say that they're all very broad categories of transportation measures, ranging from public transit measures to bicycle and pedestrian measures, shared ride services, traffic flow improvements, employer-based transportation programs, and more. Basically, if it's a measure that reduces vehicle use or improves traffic flow, it's probably already covered by the list of TCMs in Section 108F. But just in case it's not, the Clean Air Act also says explicitly that anything that meets those criteria can be considered a TCM. Please note, however, that vehicle technology-based, fuel-based, and maintenance-based measures that control the emissions from vehicles under fixed traffic conditions are not considered TCMs. In other words, the purchase of a zero-emission vehicle or an engine retrofit is not considered a TCM that must be considered in a TCM analysis. While MPOs and air districts need to consider all TCMs when they conduct a TCM analysis, they do not need to implement all of the TCMs. Two criteria that must be considered during this process are whether the TCMs are technologically and economically feasible. The threshold for whether or not a TCM must be included in a SIP depends on the type and severity of non-attainment. For example, some types of non-attainment areas must implement any TCMs that are quote-unquote reasonably available, while other types of non-attainment areas must implement quote-unquote best available TCMs. So this slide shows the various resources that we're looking into developing to support the TCM analysis process and how they could be available to the end user in what we're calling a TCM clearinghouse, or a web page within the CARB website dedicated to providing TCM analysis assistance. I'll bring up my laser pointer to show you that one of the components of the clearinghouse could be a library of TCM related documents, including regulations and any guidance documents that have been issued by US EPA over the years. Another component of the clearinghouse could be sample TCM analyses from other regions and states that CARB considers leading practices, as well as templates that CARB CARB could develop as part of this project to make the TCM analysis process more effective and easier to complete. Those templates would be optional for MPOs and air districts to use if they find them useful. The main component of the TCM clearinghouse is envisioned as an interactive and searchable database of transportation strategies that have the potential to improve air quality, including a comprehensive list of transportation control measures, or TCMs. We're proposing that one of the fields in the database, this one illustrated here, could indicate whether or not the strategy is likely to meet the Clean Air Act definition of TCM. This is because, as you may recall, a TCM analysis only needs to consider strategies that meet that TCM definition and doesn't need to consider technology or fuel-based strategies. However, we don't want to restrict this database to only TCMs when it could be useful for other purposes if it covered a broader range of transportation strategies, including those technology and fuel-based strategies. So by having TCM be one of the database fields, a user would be able to filter the list of transportation strategies to only include TCMs and use that as their starting point for a TCM analysis. If enough of a research base exists to support this, the database could have information from academic literature and other empirical data sources on whether each transportation strategy is generally thought to be technologically and economically feasible under certain conditions or in certain types of geographies. An MP or air district would need to take into account their specific local circumstances when conducting their TCM analysis, but the general information could be useful as an initial step in determining which TCMs an air district might want to pursue. If a user wanted to learn more about a specific transportation strategy in the database, they could select the strategy to do a deeper dive and learn even more information, including a detailed description of the strategy, links to related research and literature, and links to quantification methodologies and tools that could be used to estimate the emissions benefits of that type of project. Even though I'm presenting the Transportation Strategy Database as a TCM resource, it could also be useful for the CMAQ and MVVs programs. For instance, an MPO, local jurisdiction, or project sponsor or other interested party could use the database to identify potential CMAQ or MVVs projects, evaluate their effectiveness, or prioritize and select projects. Before I move on to some audience polling questions about these TCM resources, I wanted to pause here to ask Razi if we've had any clarifying questions come into the Q&A about what I've presented so far.
At this moment, we don't have any question.
Okay, great. Thanks, Razi. Hopefully that's because I'm being crystal clear. I'm now going to turn it over to Kevin again so that he can ask some poll questions related to the potential TCM resources and tools that we just discussed.
Thanks, Kristen, and hi again, folks. For this next series of questions, we have two sets of questions with 2 questions in each set. For this first set, the first question is to ask which TCM resources do you think would be useful for you and your organization? The second one is an open-ended question asking which tools or resources we haven't considered and would be helpful for your TCM analysis process. We'll take all your suggestions, so please submit each suggestion separately, and we will give folks about 2 minutes for this poll. Okay, I'm going to stop the timer right there, but if you are still working on your survey, the survey is still up, so even as I'm talking, you still have time to fill in your responses. But without further ado, it seems like the most popular TCM resource that most people would think helpful is a transportation strategy database, followed by TCM analysis samples or templates. There is a small number of you that do not need any of these resources that I am very impressed at. And with regards to tools and resources that would be helpful for the TCM process, these are some of the suggestions that we have coming in. Taking a quick look here. No suggestions at this time. Guidelines, 0. Unknown at this time. Very varied responses that we have. Again, we're just going to keep this up maybe for a couple of more seconds, but thank you again for all of your responses. Again, we will take a look at all of these responses and analyze them individually. So again, we really do appreciate all of your participation on this. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. And with that, as I'm still talking, don't worry, the other survey is still going to be up. The next poll that we're going to be doing is related to TCM analyses. There are two open-ended questions for this. So again, if you have multiple suggestions for each question, please submit each suggestion separately. Specifically, we'd like to know if you faced any challenges when conducting TCM analyses, or if you have any best practices related to TCM analyses that you'd like to share with us. For this one, because it's two open-ended questions, we'll give folks about 3 minutes. Just as soon as I activate it. Okay, so the survey should be up and available for you to take. And with that, I will probably start the timer. Okay, I'm gonna move ahead with the survey here, with the results, I mean. So the 23 surveys underway, again, as I'm talking, you are still free to submit your questions. These are some of the challenges that our participants seem to have when conducting TCM analyses. These, again, doesn't fully grasp all of their, but thank you for your input. There's some pretty complex ones and some very simple ones. And I'm glad to say that unanimously, most people do not have any best practices. So that is something that we could work towards. With that, I will turn it over to Kristen, but not before once again saying thank you. We really do appreciate your input on all of this. It does help make us more knowledgeable of what, I guess, the needs of everyone else is. Okay, with that, I will turn it back to Kristen.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. And thank you, everybody, for answering the poll questions. I believe we might have a clarifying question that came in. Rosie, is there anything that has come into the Q&A that we should respond to before we move on?
Yes, there is a question. Dennis asked, can you elaborate on what you mean by TCM analysis? Is that the related emission analysis or whether or not the project can be considered a TCM?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both of those things. We're talking about the full process that's required from at the initial phase, you have to come up with that comprehensive list of TCMs. And I think we've heard from some MPOs and air districts that even just that step can be a challenge. So we're looking to help with that initial phase of identifying potential TCMs. And then the full analysis process does go all the way through potentially looking at emissions benefits. I don't think you would do that for every TCM type, and that's the kind of thing where we could share best practices. When do you do this emissions analysis? When do you not even need to do that step? But we would just be helping people um, figure out the best ways to move through the process of identifying TCMs all the way through the end point, which again, depending on your non-attainment area, type, and severity, it would be either identifying whether there are any reasonably available TCMs that could be implemented or what the best available TCMs are that could be implemented. So that might include doing some emissions analysis work. Hopefully that answers part of the question, but I welcome the questioner to again join during the public comment period if they want like any further clarification on that, or they can drop follow-up stuff into the chat as well. Okay, and unless there's any other clarifying questions that came in, I'll just go ahead and move on to the next portion of the presentation. Another potential use case for the tools that we are developing is that they may be used to evaluate the emissions benefits of projects that are seeking funding from the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, or CMAQ program. The CMAQ program is a funding program administered by the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA. Its overall purpose is to help meet the requirements of the Clean Air Act by funding transportation projects or programs that reduce congestion and improve air quality in areas that are in non-attainment for ozone, carbon monoxide, or particulate matter. As the direct recipient of the federal funds for California, Caltrans has a statewide responsibility for oversight of the CMAQ program. However, in California, the selection of projects takes place at the regional level by the state's MPOs. CARB's role in the process is to help estimate the emissions benefits of the projects by providing technical assistance and tools. California receives approximately $500 million per year in CMAQ funding. As mentioned earlier, CMAQ funds must be used for projects that improve air quality. But FHWA does not just take applicants at their word that a project will improve air quality. In other words, no pinky promises are allowed. By law, CMAQ funds can only be used for certain eligible project types. The detailed list of eligible projects is outlined in the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, Title 23, Section 149B. But even if a project checks one of the boxes on that list, that is not enough to completely satisfy FHWA's CMAQ eligibility requirements. According to FHWA, you need to actually calculate the projected benefits of the project, or in FHWA's words, develop reliable air quality benefit estimates in order to justify the project. Those estimates eventually need to be submitted to FDA, or sorry, excuse me, to FHWA during annual reporting. This slide illustrates the CMAQ project selection process and where the calculations of emissions benefits fits within the process. MPOs typically hold project selection processes, often in the form of a grant competition, every 1 to 3 years to distribute the funds. As illustrated by this flowchart, the first step in the process is generally for project sponsors to submit their grant applications to the MPO. The MPO then confirms that the project is one of the CMAQ eligible project types in the regulations. If it's a complex or questionable project type, the MPO may consult with Caltrans, FHWA, or FTA to confirm its CMAQ eligibility. Once it's confirmed that the project is one of the CMAQ eligible project types, the MPO may choose to simply select which projects receive funding based on their regional priorities and wait to calculate the emissions benefits of the individual projects later. Alternatively, the MPO may choose to estimate the emissions benefits before project selection so that the relative cost effectiveness and emissions benefits of different projects can be used to inform project selection. It's worth noting that in the interim CMAQ guidance that was released by FHWA in November 2024, FHWA said that the assessment of emissions reductions benefits, quote, should be completed prior to project selection to better inform the selection of CMAQ projects, unquote. Another difference between some regions and others is that some MPOs ask the project sponsors to estimate their emissions benefits themselves, while other MPOs prefer to do the calculations on behalf of all the applicants in their region, so that there's consistency between the calculations and they can verify that the calculations are accurate. While calculating a project's emissions benefits may sound daunting, several quantification methods are available to help project sponsors and MPOs do this work. FHWA and Caltrans do not dictate the use of any specific methodology or tools, so sponsors may choose whichever best suits their needs. This slide shows some of the options available. First, in 2005, CARB and Caltrans jointly developed the methodologies for calculating the emissions benefits of several project types and created a Microsoft Access database tool that project sponsors can use to run the calculations. FHWA has also developed its own quantification methodologies for several project types, and each is accompanied by a Microsoft Excel tool to run the calculations. The only challenge with using the FHWA tools is that when they're used for California projects, the default emissions factors, which come from FHWA's nationwide moves model, must be replaced with the California-specific emissions factors, which come from CARB's MFAC model. Otherwise, the results won't properly reflect the types of vehicles that are on the road in California and their emissions. Finally, the third choice we have listed here is that some MPOs prefer to develop their own methodologies or formulas and simply use Excel spreadsheets to estimate emissions benefits, which is also allowed. One of the components of the project that we're talking about today is to update that 2005 quantification methodologies document, or what we often call the QM document, and the accompanying emissions calculations tools. I will discuss CARB's proposed updates in more detail shortly, but first I want to give you some background information on the MV-FEES programs because the MV-FEES program also uses that same QM document, 2005 QM document, and the associated tools. I'm going to take a brief pause also to let the interpreters keep up and to see if we've had any questions come in specifically on CMAQ that I should answer before I move on to MV-FEES.
Yes, there is one question asking, can you please repeat the California provision on the FHWA toolkit or type in the chat?
Sure, I will repeat it, and then we can also possibly respond in the chat, but we want to make sure that any Spanish language participants hear the answer as well. So what we're saying is that FHWA does have tools where you can estimate emissions benefits, but the emissions factors that are working in the background of their tools are from the nationwide moves model. So that, because we have cleaner vehicle requirements in California and cleaner fuel requirements, if you're using emissions factors from the nationwide model, they're not going to be accurate for California. So that is why if you're going to use their formulas, which is fine, and they have some project types that we don't have, you would just need to update the emissions factors with factors from CARB's MFAC model, because that model uses the California fleet information and the California fuel information. And if you were to need technical assistance with any of that, you could always contact the CARB CMAQ staff with our email address, which is part of this presentation at the end. I'll give the interpreters a chance to finish that. Rosie, are there any other questions while we wait?
There is one question asking when and where will this recording be available?
Yes, this recording will be posted in on the CARB CMAC website. We'll provide a link to that, and I think at some point we're going to drop that link into the chat. Right now, the slides are up on that website, and then the recording will also be available on that website within the next 2 weeks at the longest. Are there any other questions, Rosie?
No.
Okay, great. We'll move on to motor vehicle fees then. In 1990, the California legislature passed Assembly Bill 2766, or AB 2766, which gave local air districts in California the authority to impose a surcharge of up to $6 per vehicle on motor vehicle registration fees to help implement the California Clean Air Act of 1988. Please note that while there may be several motor vehicle registration fees in your area and in the state, throughout today's workshop, we will be referring to the AB 2766 program as the MV Fees program. Under AB 2766, local air districts can decide how large of a surcharge they want to impose within the $6 per vehicle maximum. The revenues must be used to reduce air pollution from motor vehicles or for planning, monitoring, enforcement, or other activities necessary to implement the California Clean Air Act. The MP fees surcharge generates approximately $100 million in funding per year statewide. CARB's role is to develop guidance for quantifying the benefits of MV fees projects. Local air districts can use any methodology they see fit to select the projects and programs that are funded by the MV fees revenues. Some districts hold a competitive process to distribute the funds, while others use the funds for ongoing air quality programs or for projects that are identified based on emerging needs. AB 2766 does not require that the districts quantify the emissions benefits of the projects, although some do choose to do this. And since quantifying emissions is not required, there is no required methodology for doing so. However, as you may recall from my comments about the CMAQ program, CARB and Caltrans jointly developed resources in 2005 that were meant to help quantify the emissions benefits of both CMAQ and MVFees projects. And those resources are the ones that will be updated with this project. So what do we mean exactly when we talk about the 2005 resources and say that they're going to be updated? There are essentially going to be two major components of the updates. First, we are going to update the quantification methodologies themselves, or the mathematical formulas that are used to calculate a project's emissions benefits. The existing methodologies and formulas are still valid despite not having been updated since 2005, but as you know, a lot has changed in the world of transportation since 2005. There have been new innovations in fuel and technology, entirely new modes of transportation introduced, and changes in typical travel behavior. Therefore, in conversations with Caltrans, CARB will be adding new innovative project types to the QM document so that those project types can more easily be evaluated and funded if they're found to be cost effective. In addition to adding new project types, CARB will be updating the formulas for the existing project types as well. The idea is that once all of the formulas have been updated, based on the latest data and research, MPOs and project sponsors will be able to better understand which projects are the most cost-effective at improving air quality and could more easily prioritize those for funding if they choose. Second, in addition to updating the formulas that are used to calculate the emissions benefits and documenting the new formulas in the QM document, CARB is proposing to update the accompanying tools as well. The tools are provided so that project sponsors can easily plug input values into a calculator and run the numbers to find the estimated emissions benefits of their projects. As noted previously, the tool that CARB currently offers to quantify the emissions benefits of CMAQ and MVFES projects is a single Microsoft Access tool that is used for all project types. The bright blue screenshots you see here are what the Microsoft Access tool currently looks like when you open it to input your project information. With this project, CARB is proposing to move to Excel-based tools and have individual Excel tools for each project category rather than a single tool for all project types. You may wonder what project types are currently available and what project types we're considering adding going forward. On this slide, you can see the list of project types that are currently covered by the 2005 Quantification Methodologies document and the calculator tool. These include cleaner on-road vehicles, cleaner off-road vehicles, new bus service, van pools and shuttles, park and ride lots, signal coordination, pedestrian facilities, bicycle facilities, telecommuting programs, and cleaner street sweepers. As you can see, this list of project types in the 2005 document is fairly limited and doesn't cover the wide breadth of activities that are eligible for CMAQ and MVFES funding, which is why we also plan to add new project types. On this slide, you can see some of the new project types that we are considering adding to the QM document and creating tools for, including zero-emission vehicles and infrastructure, micromobility strategies such as bike share and scooter share, transit capital improvements to enhance reliability, speed, and comfort of transit, transit pricing strategies such as reduced fares or fare-free days, transit operational improvements, and car share. But that's not all. There have been so many new innovations since 2005 that we actually needed a second slide. We are also considering adding the project types listed on this slide, including roundabouts, oh, no problem, roundabouts, pricing strategies such as parking pricing, intelligent transportation systems, or ITS, mobility as a service, mobility hubs, and diesel idle reduction strategies. We aren't proposing to create QMs for every CMAQ eligible project type. Our efforts will largely be focused on VMT reduction and air quality improvements, but will also provide links to other CARB resources that could help quantify, for example, off-road construction equipment, which is eligible for CMAQ, but is not a focus of our efforts with this project. Please note that while this is the list of project types we're hoping to include, we're going to be constrained by the available research and by limited time. For instance, if there's not a lot of research yet on the travel behavior impacts of mobility as a service or mobility hubs, then we may not be able to complete those QMs in the near future, although we could add them down the line as new research becomes available. It will also take our staff some time to complete these, and the QMs will become available on a rolling basis. Your input today and throughout the project can help us prioritize this work. We would now like to get your feedback on the CMAC and MV-FEES resources that we may develop. So we're going to, once again, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin so he can ask you some questions using the Poll Everywhere software tool. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kristen. This is our last poll consisting of 4 questions with 2 open-ended questions towards the end. With the first 2 questions, we want to get an idea of which of the QM tools you've used or would like to use, and what kind of new project types would be helpful to you. And for the next 2 questions, we'd like to know if we're missing anything or could improve in some areas. For this, we're going to give you about 3 minutes to answer these questions. Okay, I'm gonna start going over the results here, but before I do that, if you have been providing us your input all this time, we would like to appreciate you and thank you for giving us your input. It would appear that of all the existing project types, QMs that we have been having, the ones that I guess most people are familiar with and would like to continue to use in the future appears to be bike facilities, followed by pedestrian facilities. And there seems to be a larger demand proportionally for zero emission vehicle and infrastructure, followed by, I want to say, roundabouts and micromobility, and transit pricing strategies. Are we missing anything on our list of new projects? I think the only thing that we have is EV infrastructure and charging stations. It comes here, potentially demo projects or temporary projects. Okay. We will be keeping this open for a little bit, so if you would still like to continue to contribute, feel free. And as for suggestions, we have several varieties of suggestions, which again, we do appreciate and we'll be taking a look at. For these last 2 poll questions, I understand they're a little bit more complex, so I'll probably be leaving up these for a while, even after my portion is done. Wow. That is a very comprehensive suggestion. Thank you. But for now, thank you again for providing us your input and suggestions. And with that, I will turn it back to Kristen to close up our workshop for today.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's really tempting to just like dive into my screen and try to look at all those answers. I'm looking forward to reading through them later. So thank you again, everyone, for your feedback. Before we shift over to public comments, we're almost there, I promise. I want to wrap up the presentation portion of today's workshop with the project timeline. We're currently conducting outreach on the draft list of quantification methodologies, or QMs, including both the list of new project types and the list of existing project types that we're considering for an update. As you probably noticed in the previous slides, even before getting your feedback today, we had identified approximately 24 potential project types, each of which may need a new or updated quantification methodology and an accompanying calculation tool. It would take some time to develop all these materials. However, unlike in the past, when we released a single QM document that covered all project types and a single tool for all project types, with this update, we're proposing to release the methodologies and tools individually or in small batches on a staggered, ongoing basis. This will make it easier to refresh the tools continuously as new research becomes available. It will also make it easier to collect focused feedback on an ongoing basis from experts within specific topic areas. Throughout 2025, we will be working to develop and update the highest priority QMs and tools, as identified by interested parties during the outreach phase, and will begin to work on the TCM Clearinghouse after considering your feedback today, potentially including developing the Transportation Strategies database and collecting resources and sample materials. We expect that we will be able to begin releasing new QMs and tools on a staggered basis in late 2025 and will continue releasing them into 2026 and beyond. The release of the TCM Clearinghouse is also expected in the first part of 2026. With each QM and tool that we release, we will continue to offer a public comment period. If you'd like to be added to our contact list to receive updates when a new QM or tool is proposed for release, you can use the link on this slide to sign up. If you were to look at the slides on the website, it would have an active link. The link is also available on CARB's CMAC and MVFE's web pages if you click on subscribe, and we will drop the link into the chat now. I believe Rosie may have even already done so. That concludes our formal presentation, and we'll now move into the public comment portion of the workshop, where participants are invited to verbally provide comments or questions. If you'd like to ask a question or make a public comment verbally, please raise your hand by using the raise hand function in Zoom, or if you're participating by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Due to the large number of participants in today's workshop, we'll need to set a time limit for each speaker. We kind of want to get a feel for how many people are interested in speaking before we decide exactly what that time limit is, because we want to give you as much time as we can. That said, if you're interested in making a public comment verbally or asking a question verbally, if you could go ahead and use the raised hand function or *9 feature now, we can assess how many questions there are. I think we were going to start with probably a 2-minute limit. We also will use this opportunity if there were any questions that came into the Q&A that we didn't answer immediately because they weren't clarifying questions. We will, if that's happened, we will go ahead and read those aloud, take an opportunity to answer those. Please note that we won't be reading aloud all of the written comments that came in the interest of time, but all of them have been logged and will be considered as we refine our plans and conduct the work. Okay, so it looks like some people are possibly raising hands. I'm going to actually turn this part over to Rosie to facilitate muting and unmuting participants, but I'm going to continue to be here to answer questions if needed, and as is the rest of the CARB team. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I don't see any raised hand. So I'm gonna go through the questions in the QA box. The first question is, can we use Caltrans tool called CTMFAC based on MFAC?
Sure, I'll take this question and answer it. CT-MFAC is used by Caltrans. It uses the emission factor from the MFAC model, but however, it's not approved by US EPA. So we recommend you to use the MFAC model, or alternatively, we also CARB staff also under this program for CMAC, MVFE, and TCM analysis. We develop the emission factor every year and post it on our website. In the same website, you can find the CMAC under the CMAC folder. That's a cost effectiveness tool. The MFAC emission factors are available for different vehicle categories and technologies there. That's another place you can use it. So we recommend you to use since this program is as part of a SIP, we recommend you to use MFAC model or this emission factor, since those are the one US EPA approved for. So feel free to, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to come online and ask more clarifying questions, but you can also reach out to us by email. We'll be happy to provide more details.
Thanks, Nasamani. The next question is it looking like all project types available in FHWA toolkit be available in the proposed updated quantification methodologies?
Sure. I think that's the goal. We are trying our best to bring in as many projects as possible and try to include it in our updated tools as well. But the benefit of in this one is we'll be using the California specific emission factor and the technology as well as the local information wherever we can find. And that's what we'll be providing here. But the methodology wise, it might be similar. So that's the only difference. The list of projects might be still will be covering similar to what's in the FHWA one, but this will be more applicable to the California situation and condition here. So that's what we are trying to do in this program itself.
Thanks. The next question is, can you please put the link for updates in the chat?
Sure, we will do that. I think maybe we can do it as we speak. And it's also, as Kristen said in the presentation, also the links will be available. You can use that to register and to get the list, updated list every time when we post our new QM available. So you should be able to get that email as well. I don't know,
I
Kristen.
think the link is in there now. I see it. It's the one that's public.gov delivery. So you would be signing up for a Gov delivery subscription in for the CMAQ and MV fees topic. You can also sign up for other CARB topics, but that's the topic list that we'll be using to distribute updates about this project.
Okay. The last question is not last question, but the next question is, please address how you are avoiding duplication with FHWA CMAQ toolkit and providing specific instructions or adjustments to ensure apples to apples comparison with other CARB tool analyzed projects. Also, please address how CARB tool analysis can be converted to move-based results. This is especially important over the next 4 years.
Sure, let me take a crack at it, but maybe I'm not remembering every aspect of your question. I know it's a lengthy question, but let me say that here I think under this program, we are trying to provide, as I said seconds ago, provide the California specific methodology and as well as trying to use the latest information from California, emission factors, the technology, the fleet mix, everything here. So that's what it will be consistent here. So it will be very applicable to the California regulations. It also includes all the regulations that California has adopted. So that's what we are requiring to use it. So this methodology will help you to quantify the cost effectiveness as well as the benefit, air quality benefits, appropriate and accurate to best available information. I know you asked, we need to provide a conversion factor to the MOOS. You may know already that California is, we don't, except California, like the remaining 49 states use MOOS model. So we don't have to provide any conversion factor. Maybe I'm not better understanding that part of your question. Are you asking us to provide the conversion factor? The MOOS model has a totally different fleet mix. It has a different regulation requirements. It's all based on the national US EPA requirement. So that's why it may not be applicable to California situation. If I misunderstand your question, please feel free to come online and clarify the question, please.
Okay. We have 2 raised hands. Paul, you want to ask your question? I allowed you to talk. Please unmute and feel free to ask your question.
Paul, can you hear us?
Oh, there we go. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. I'm at the right meeting this time. So I'm just real quick. I'm at South Coast. I'm in the MVPs program here. So just two questions. One's kind of a little technical, but I know that zero emission vehicles are kind of in the proposed new projects, but we do those currently, but um, there is a bit of confusion on my end for zero emission off-road vehicles like forklifts and um, utility vehicles. We kind of use the same formula that includes a load factor, which is really more appropriate for like diesel powered vehicles. I'm just wondering if you had any advice for what sort of load factor we could use for an electric motor in those situations. Like if let's say a city is purchasing a forklift, but it's electric and there's no like I don't know if the load factor is really appropriate to use for that currently. Um,
Sure. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Paul. Please go ahead.
and then just my second question, that TCM database that you guys talked about earlier, it's not something I'm familiar with at all, but I know you guys were adding the TCM part, but is that database sort of available currently? Because it just might be useful to help kind of build a list of project examples that we could highlight for our own thing. That's my
Sure.
whole thing.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks for asking those questions. The first question, let me answer that one. Under the CMAC, we don't cover the off-road equipments or any of these things at this point. But however, CARB is responsible. There might be other divisions. We'll be happy to reach out to them, get you information related to that, like what should be the load factor we should use for electric forklifts and everything. So if you can send us an email, that will be great. We can connect you with the right folks, and they'll be able to answer that question. The second part of your question, the TCM database, that's not available yet. We are working on it right now as we speak. So based on all your feedback and suggestions, we will go and refine it, and we will make it publicly available as soon as it is possible. And that's the proposed idea from this program itself. So that's what we are working on as we speak. I don't have a specific timeline for you, Paul, but we will try our best to get it done. That's where if you register for that, subscribe to the email server, and then we'll be posting it there and send you an email as well as soon as it's available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Warren has a question. Please unmute and ask your question.
Good. Thank you for calling on me. Yeah, Masmani, thanks for addressing the question, and thank you guys for opening this up. It's timely. It's been a fair amount of time since you guys have updated the toolkit, and we really appreciate it. In the SCAG region, which represents probably about half of the state's CMAQ funds, we're actually utilizing the FHWA tool, partly because it's more up to date, and it's a lot easier for project applicants to use. Since even like here at SCAG, we can't actually open the Access database because of our IT restrictions. So we appreciate the move both to CMAQ as well as, or not CMAQ, Excel, as well as the overall updates. But like in, part of your response, and we appreciate kind of, the nuances for California with MFAC and different fleet mix. However, as you recall, and we went through all of the fun the last time around, it may be conceivable that we will have issues with MFAC continuing in the future. So being able to have like a easy way to translate between moves, back and forth between moves and MFAC, may be especially important to essentially have that kind of in mind, because if we have another safe rule type of action like how do we do that and essentially have a ability to have an apples to apples comparison across projects, and especially because these are federal funds, and if there is any question from USDOT on the analysis, because we're using something that the administration has issues with, like yeah, I think you know where I'm going on that, and I don't want to get myself into any trouble, but just want to kind of lay that out. So yeah, we would appreciate any ways that both try not to reinvent what FHWA has done, but also like how do we kind of leverage that, but also like be able to move back and forth between any additional, because especially the EV transition likely won't show up on the FHWA tool or may be removed from the FHWA tool if there is one in there. So yeah, so as you guys are doing this work, we'd appreciate that kind of thought. So thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Warren, for your question. Sorry, I have to. I'm hearing that you are not able to download our Access database and use it for all your program purpose. Maybe that's another reason why we are trying our best to move towards spreadsheet, so easy for you all to download and use it as well. So Warren, I think in this case situation, I know there are lots of things we don't know what's going to be, how the federal administration is going to change and what are the requirements and everything. But as of now, I think the apples to apple comparison would be still, you can use the FHWA methodology. There's no question on that. Only when if you can input the emission factor, take it from the California, either you can run the MFAC model, or you can even use the emission factor that we published under the CMAQ program website itself. You can plug in those numbers and estimate the benefits. The methodology wise, it should be similar, consistent there. So you are using appropriate emission factors because with all the latest technologies and everything reflected in that fleet mix and emission factor reflecting for California conditions. So that's my first recommendation for you. Okay. The second one, I know you asked a little bit of a larger question. We will be evaluating as we speak. We are also working on the next version of the MFAC model. This is where the new changes from the federal administration, we are also closely working with US EPA, making sure we are reflecting the appropriate regulations and everything. So that will happen in the next few months or year. We don't know how long it will take, but that's where we are working towards. So once we have some more clarity on that, we'll be able to update the emission factor. We try to update the emission factor every year. Okay, so maybe this September, we will again update the emission factor and post it. At that time, whatever the best available information, best emission factor that's applicable for California, that's what we'll be developing and posting it on our website as well and share it with you. So I'll be happy to talk to you more if you have a very specific question on the methodology. The EV one, that's what we are trying to do our best, because given that many project sponsoring agencies in California are looking for a methodology on that and trying to move in that direction. So we will try our best to provide that methodology as early as possible as well. So I hope I addressed your concern, Warren, but I'll be happy to answer any other question you may have, or I'll be happy to talk to you as well offline if needed. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we'll follow up offline if there's more. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
There is another question. I think, Nesamani, you answered somehow this question. Is there any existing quick reference guide available for how users can update the emission factors in the FHWA toolkit with the factors from the MFAC model?
Sure. I think I don't have a specific tool in front of me to show it to you on the screen, but what you can do is run for your region or your county or whatever the level of geographic resolution you are trying to estimate the benefits for. You can run that MFAC model and estimate the emission factor, download that emission factor per mile, and then that could be input into the FHWA toolkit spreadsheet itself. You can swap that, replace the MOOS emission factor with the California specific emission factor, and then you run their spreadsheet. So that should give you the benefits for California specific. I don't know if you're asking for a specific project or specific methodology document that from the FHWA, then we will be happy to take a look at it and provide you more specific step-by-step direction as well if you prefer that. Please let us know which project or which spreadsheet tool you're referring to. We'll be happy to take a look at it and give you a little more specific direction there.
I don't see any more questions in the QA section, and also I don't see any raised hand.
You know, we are on exactly 4:30, so but yeah, that's not a constraint for asking any questions. So if you have any other questions, feel free to come online and ask, or yeah, we'll be happy to stay here for a few more minutes if needed.
Kristen, you are muted.
So maybe, yeah, Christian, maybe if you want to come and wrap up. I don't see any other questions.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was muted.
Mhm.
I was trying to stay quiet during the public comment period, but I just wanted to say that I have shared the screen again so that you can see the other alternatives for providing feedback. We invite you to email public comments. If you think of anything later, or if you had maybe a more in-depth comment that you didn't ask today, you're welcome to send any of those things to cmac@arb.ca.gov. That's the email address. We use that email address to take feedback on both CMAC and MV fees and TCM analyses. So you can use that email for any of the topics discussed today. We will also, like we said, be posting all of the workshop materials online, including a recording of today's workshop. That will be up within 2 weeks, probably earlier than that. And the web address is shown here, where you'll be able to find those things. So with that, I will stop sharing just so that I can see everyone on our team's faces and say thank you so much for participating in today's workshop. I think the most exciting part of the workshop for me was getting to see your feedback start to come in, because I think that's really going to help us make the project as helpful as possible. And I did see Carrie come on screen. So if any other CARB staff want to make any closing comments before we sign off, you're invited to do that.
No, I just I
Just wanted to
just
show
came
your
on
face.
screen just to say hello and thank you to everyone as well. We really appreciate all of this input, and we'll be looking through all of the comments that we had to scroll past relatively quickly, but want to appreciate everyone again and thank you very much for attending today.
Yes, thank you, and have a great afternoon, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.